My name is Rahmin Sarabi. I'm speaking to you here from San Francisco. Brief bio, I'm a first-generation Iranian American, and at this time, as much as ever, it's apt that the promise and ideals of democracy are very inspiring, not only for the folks that are in Iran today, but I think as a beacon for the world. At the same time, growing up, I, like many, found myself disillusioned at the reality of our democracy. And I think that's part of why we're here today, asking what would a more perfect union look like? It's been said in different ways that business as usual democratic institutions are convincing fewer and fewer of their legitimacy and their ability to respond to this moment. This is as true nationally as it is in LA, of course, which is why many of us are here today. At the same time, this is amidst a backdrop of escalating societal issues and polarization. One way or another, the challenges our democracies are being asked to respond to are just getting tougher and tougher. I think as Don suggested, all of us in this room are here because we believe improving electoral politics is not enough. It's necessary, but not sufficient. And there's just a whole bunch of structural dynamics around elections and representative democracy that don't let us respond at the scale that's needed for the 21st century. Fortunately, again, a new paradigm of democracy, we could say, is emerging or re-emerging that can meet these challenges head on. And in fact, the roots of these practices go back to the wisdom of antiquity. Socrates is quoted roughly as saying that democracy by elections leads to oligarchy, and a truer democracy is one supported by lotteries, and the sortition process we'll share more here. At the same time, you can find some of these roots in the country of India and what was happening in the continent there. So this was a co-emergent form of wisdom. We're going to talk about the frame of citizen assemblies, but really this is a larger approach, often referred to as deliberative democracy. And there are a lot of flavors of roughly similar design principles. So citizen panels, juries, councils, same, but different. I just want to get that out there. And if you took away one thing about these approaches in general, it's that they can depolarize and resolve otherwise stuck issues in electoral politics. At this point, in the last 3 decades, there have been over 600 cases around the world demonstrating this, creating breakthrough solutions beyond partisan politics. They are resistant to typical corruption. They unlock wise action. And maybe as importantly as anything, they activate engaged citizens. It's an invitation into a new culture of citizenship that's much more active instead of the passive deference of all of our decision-making rights. I find it's really powerful to actually look at what an assembly looks like in practice. So these 30 folks are all from the state of Michigan. This was a demonstration panel in October of 2020, taking on the questions of how the state should move forward on COVID-19. Again, as divisive as an issue as we could imagine, in the context of an extremely divisive time. October 2020 was right before the elections. There was a plot to kidnap the governor. Amidst all that, this group of Michiganders came together and developed 12 policy proposals that had 70% agreement or higher, which is kind of a remarkable premise when we think about the slight majorities that advance most of our actions in electoral politics. One of the most remarkable cases that is often told is in Ireland. In Ireland, same-sex marriage was constitutionally prohibited. As we would recall, it's a Catholic country. Politically, it's lose-lose for any politician to really touch this. And what emerged was the wisdom to defer this to a citizen assembly. So you had 100 folks, representative, again, of all walks of life in Ireland, including these gentlemen on the left. This is Finnabar O'Brien, who was a rural postal worker, relatively conservative, and then Chris Lyons on the right, who was a young gay man who, what was at stake for him was the question of whether there was a future for him in Irish society. As it would happen, they were seated at the same table, the same small group table, and they were like oil and water initially. But the breakthrough in their relationship led to Finnebar delivering a speech that was seen as very impactful and moving. And this is, I think, indicative that the shifts that happen at the policy level really are part and parcel with the shifts that happen at the relational level. These are vehicles for breakthroughs through a lot of the polarization and divide. In Ireland, this case then led to this becoming a standard practice for how they handled difficult issues. After same-sex marriage, they took on abortion, which again was constitutionally prohibited. Most recently, they've taken on issues of biodiversity loss, drug policy, electoral reform. It's just part of the culture now. And I think it's a great inspiration point for what this could look like if we embedded it in our own democracies here. Another major case, you may remember the yellow vest response in France a few years ago. Again, there were attempts from the federal government to start to respond to climate issues. But as we've seen in probably many aspects of our own lives, if our voices aren't included in a process, change tends to be resisted, as we saw with the yellow vest response. So Macron and the French government said, okay, we're going to host a citizens' climate convention. 150 French citizens got together over the course of 6 months, developed over 100 policy proposals. They're still working their way through the system, but case in point, you might have seen the headline just 2 days ago. This is directly tied to a recommendation from the Assembly. They banned short haul flights in situations where you can do train travel in 2.5 hours or less. So this is a sort of remarkable thing that wouldn't happen through electoral politics. This was kind of the wisdom and voice of the people. One other case, again, I'm kind of giving you a high-level breeze through a few cases, and we're going to go deeper in with the speakers that lie ahead. In Austria, they have actually, again, institutionalized this in a way that the community members, if 1,000 of them sign a petition, the state will spool up one of these in response. You can think of it as a pop-up citizen think tank, grappling with, again, the trickiest issues. If we go back a few years ago, we all remember the Syrian refugee crisis and the questions of how to respond. Maybe this helps us recognize that while there's a technical dimension to most issues, at the root of them, there's values-based trade-offs. And too often our electoral politics pits them as zero-sum, when in fact we can find ways forward that honor the spectrum of values from progressive to conservative. And refugee issues were a great embodiment of that. You had concerns about preserving the character of the community, and then you had values around fairness and caring that said, hey, these are folks in need. And in practice, when they were able to put it all on the table, they found a way forward that said, we want to be a community that builds as many lifeboats metaphorically as possible. They're literal words. And the request back to government was to play a role in coordinating civil society actors, in coordinating the volunteer response. So these are the 20 folks from this part of Austria that were part of that process. Okay, so that's some anecdotal stories. If we're going to look at the recipe, the design principles behind these processes, it's really 3 things. One, folks are selected, as we've said, by democratic lottery, as opposed to elections or appointments. What this means is you're getting a cross-section, a microcosm of the community, sometimes called a mini-public, that represents all walks of life around dimensions that as conveners we think matter most. These, again, you can't be exhaustive, but these are things like gender, age, education, race, income, opinion, ideologically on a given issue. They're given good conditions for collaborative problem solving as opposed to adversarial problem solving. This is time and access to experts on all sides of the issue. And then they make the recommendations typically by supermajority, 70% agreement or greater. So this is transformative common ground that lets us move forward beyond typical win-lose politics. I'm going to end with just a few quotes from people that have been part of these processes. What does it feel like as a citizen in these spaces? This is from a gentleman that was part of a panel this last summer in California. He left feeling that working in a healthy community was a reachable goal, energized by possibilities instead of feeling defeated by competing needs. In fact, as he says here, it was not a zero-sum game, and it's exciting to imagine city or municipal leadership that works through this sort of model. This is what the originators of democracy had intended it felt like for this woman, Deb. It was an honor to learn about her community through the process, the ideas everybody holds, and to create new solutions together. So I think I've gone over my time, so I'm going to breeze through here. There's a host of benefits. Takeaways: we believe citizen assemblies can upgrade democracy, and we have a unique moment in LA and in California. Thank you for your time, and I will pass it back to Don and the rest of the speakers.